Hello friends, welcome to another episode of Commander Dive. Today we are looking at Mimeoplasm, the Revered One. This is a Sultai commander. I've always really liked Mimeoplasm, however, I've never really built it. So with Aetherdrift, I finally have a chance to build this guy. This is obviously a different version of that card, but I think it's even better. So this was a really fun deck to build. Let's get into it. As always, I'm Adam, and this is Commander Text. Mimeoplasm Revered One. Like I said, this is a Sultai commander. It is X, black, green, blue. Legendary creature Ooze. It's a 0/0. As it enters, exile up to X creature cards from your graveyard. Enters with 3 1/1 counters on it for each creature card exiled this way. You can then pay 2, and Mimeoplasm becomes a copy of target creature exiled with it, except it's a 0/0 and has this ability. So what's really cool about this commander is you basically exile a couple creatures, and then at instant speed, you can turn Mimeoplasm into one of those creatures. So you can either give him hexproof, you can give him unblockable, you can do lots of different things. Just a really fun and interesting commander deck. It's Voltron, it's self-mill, it's keywords. Just a really interesting take on a Sultai commander. I had a lot of fun building this deck. Let's get into that first category.
Upon a shattered glass jar and 4 baby turtles.
That was us.
Shut up.
Oh, no.
The little ones were crawling into a strange glowing ooze from a broken canister nearby.
So in addition to everything else we have going on in this deck, it also has an Ooze sub-theme. And so we've put a bunch of Ooze cards in here, and the first is Necrotic Ooze. It's 2 and 2 black pips for an Ooze. It's a 4/3, and as long as Necrotic Ooze is on the battlefield, it has all activated abilities of all creature cards in all graveyards. So we don't have a lot of activated abilities in this deck. However, just a 4/3 for 4 is not bad, and again, we're just getting in there for that Ooze sub-theme, and getting the activated abilities of something in someone else's graveyard could be really good. So this is just a fun piece here. Next up, we have Uchulan. I think that's how you say that. It's 3 and a black, and its power is equal to the number of crabs, oozes, and or horrors you control. So we have, I don't know, 10 or 15 oozes in this deck. So this could be, probably most likely a 2 or 3. But at the beginning of your end step, you exile up to 1 target creature from an opponent's graveyard. If you do, create a token that's a copy of Uchulan. So basically, every turn you're going to get another Uchulan, and it's going to get bigger, and so is the copy. So that's Horrific Symbiosis, the name of that ability. A fun card. Next up, we have a pretty famous one here. This is Experiment Kraj, or Kraj, however you want to say it. It's 2 green pips, and 2 blue pips. This can go infinite pretty easy with several cards, but that's not what this is doing. This is just a cool way to put counters on our creature and also get another Ooze into the deck. So this is an Ooze mutant, 4/6. He has all activated abilities of each other creature with a 1/1 counter on it. So, and then you can tap him, put a 1/1 counter on target creature. It doesn't have to be your creature. Again, we don't have very many activated abilities, but this is one. This is an activated ability, so it does pair up with the previous cards. Moving on, we have Biowaste Blob. This is 2 and 2 green pips for an Ooze. It's a 0/0, and it says oozes you control get +1/+1. So although our oozes are going to be bigger, at the beginning of your upkeep, if you control a commander, create a token that's a copy of Biowaste Blob. So again, an Ooze that replicates itself. All right, now we have, this is one of my favorite cards of all time. This is one of the first cards I ever played with in Standard, and it holds a special place in my heart. This is Mimeoplasm, 2 and a green for a 1/1 Ooze creature. Whenever you cast a spell, Mimeoplasm gets +X/+X until end of turn, where X is that spell's converted mana cost. This is not very menacing. However, I promise you, if you get this on the battlefield, you can make it a 6/6 pretty easily. And in Standard, it was really, really good. This is just a card. It's a pet card. I had to have it in this deck. Next up, we have a new card from Aetherdrift. This is Ooze Patrol. 3 and a green. Great art for an ooze. It's a 2/2. When this creature enters, you mill 2 cards, then put a 1/1 counter on this creature for each artifact and or creature card in your graveyard. This can get, pretty big. It can be a 6/6 pretty easily. Next up, we have a staple card. This is Scavenger Ooze, 1 and a green. Ooze is a 2/2. You can pay a green, exile a target card from a graveyard. If it was a creature card, put a 1/1 counter on this creature and you gain 1 life. So over time, this can get pretty big. This is a great little creature card. It was reprinted in Foundations too, so you can pick it up for next to nothing. Next up, we have the OG, the Mimeoplasm, 2 black, green, blue. For an ooze, it's a 0/0. As it enters the battlefield, you exile 2 creature cards from graveyards. If you do, it enters the battlefield as a copy of one of those cards with a number of additional 1/1 counters on it equal to the power of the other card. So copies one, and then it takes the power and toughness off the other. Actually, it's not power and toughness. It gets, because you can have something that has higher power and lower toughness. It gets counters equal to the power. So I really like this card. Again, like I said, I've never had a chance to build it, so I built the new one, and I think that this fits well into the 99 for that. All right, now we have a 1-drop. This is Experiment 1, and it's just a green pip for a human ooze. That's a 1/1, and it's Evolve. Whenever a creature enters the battlefield under your control, if that creature has greater power and toughness than this creature, put a 1/1 counter on this creature. So this will start off as a 1/1, but as we play stuff out, it's going to get bigger and bigger. You can then remove 2 1/1 counters from it to regenerate it, which is really good, which means it's going to be difficult to remove. It's just going to have to be exiled. A great early card. All right, that's the end of the oozes. Let's now take a look at Self-mill is something I've done quite a bit of. I have several videos on the topic. I'm actually going to add some tags here if it's something you want to explore even more. But here are some more cards that I haven't talked about before that fit really well into this theme and work well with this deck. So the first up is Sludge Titan. This is 4 and 2 hybrid black-green pips. It's a zombie giant from the Clue set, and it's a 6/6 with trample. And it says when it enters the battlefield or attacks, you mill 5 cards. You may put a creature card and or land card from among them into your hand. There's a lot of cards that do this. This guy just happens to be a really big beater, and he mills quite a few cards. So he does 5 cards, which is more than a lot of other creatures. So DC Brood Tyrant. This is 1 black, green, blue Sultai card. This is a Naga Shaman 3/3. When it enters the battlefield or attacks, you mill 3 cards. So this is 4, and it only mills 3, so you get 2 less cards, but this has a really cool ability too that says whenever 1 or more creature cards are put into your graveyard from your library, create a 2/2 black zombie creature token. So this is just going to be a bonus for getting those cards out of our graveyard, which we're going to do quite a bit of with Mimeoplasm and other things. Next up, we have Urborg Lurgoyf. This is 1 and a green for a Lurgoyf creature. It's got kicker blue and or black. As it enters the battlefield, you mill 3 cards for each time it was kicked. So if you basically pay 4, you get to mill 6 cards for 4 mana. Even better than Sludge Titan. But then it has power that is equal to the number of creature cards in your graveyard, and toughness is equal to that number +1. So this can get really big if you play it late in the game, and can just be a great beater and a great way to mill yourself. Next up, we have Rampant Frog Gantua. This is 2 and a green for a frog that's a 3/3. It's got trample. Rampant Frog Gantuan gets +10/+10 for each player who has lost the game. So you can get +20/+20 on this thing. And whenever it deals combat damage to a player, you may mill that many cards. So if you want to mill 20 cards, you have that ability. And then put any number of land cards from among them onto the battlefield tap. So you can get a whole bunch of lands if this is really big. Even as an early card, this isn't bad. But my favorite thing to do with this would be to actually exile with Mimeoplasm, with 6 counters. And now it's not just a 20/20, it's a 26/26, and it's a 1-hit kill commander. And you can mill yourself a whole bunch. And then the next time you play it, basically now you're going to get even more choices to exile things. Next up, we have Cruel Somnophage. This is 1 and a black for a nightmare with star, which means that its power and toughness are equal to the number of creature cards in all graveyards. All graveyards was really good. And then you can pay 1 and a blue for the sorcery adventure side, and target player mills 4 cards. So you can mill yourself, and then you're gonna have the most creatures. So even though you have a lot, maybe they have a few, and then you're gonna have an even bigger Cruel Somnophage. And that's the end of the mill category. Like I said, these are 5 cards that I haven't featured before that fit well here. If you're interested, again, go back and click one of those tags and check out one of those other videos. Let's move on to...
It's kind of like a mass that keeps getting bigger and bigger.
Every one of you watching this screen, look out. Because soon, very soon, the most horrifying monster menace ever conceived will be oozing into this theater.
Protection is a vital part of this deck. This deck completely revolves around Mimeoplasm, and without it on the battlefield, you might as well just scoop. So we've put in a lot of different pieces of protection, and the first card here is Venomthrop. It's 1 green-blue for a Tyrannid. I apologize, Warhammer fans, if I said that wrong, but this is a Warhammer 40k card. It's a 2/2, Flying Death Touch Hexproof. So the hexproof part is the really important part. We're really hoping to mill this into our graveyard, and then when we cast Mimeoplasm, we exile this card, and we can then pay the 2 mana to basically gain hexproof. The flying is also really nice here, so it gives us some evasion as well. And I gotta shout out the flavor text here. See that cloud that hangs around it? More than a minute in there, you'll be bleeding out of places you didn't even know you had. Very Starship Troopers-like. I just love this card. Moving on, we have Guardian Augmenter. It's 2 and a green for a Troll Wizard that's a 2/2. It's flash. Commander creatures you control get +2/+2, which is nice. But here's the important part. Commanders you control have hexproof. So you can just throw this on the board, and it'll give Mimeoplasm hexproof, and they'll have to remove this before they can remove your commander. But even better than that is if you can exile this, because it puts that text on Mimeoplasm, so now he has built-in hexproof, and really good that way to just, the only way you're going to remove it then is with a board wipe. Next up, we have Troll Ascetic. This is 1 and 2 green pips, a Troll Shaman. It's a 3/2. It's got hexproof on it, so you're just doing it for the keyword here. But also, it's got 1 and a green, and you can regenerate Troll Ascetic. So you can regenerate your Mimeoplasm, which means that when someone does a board wipe, you can pay the 2 mana, turn into this, and then you use the pay 1 and a green, and you just regenerate it so it doesn't get destroyed. Even better than that is if you were just able to basically make it indestructible. So Barbed Servitor does exactly that. It's 3 and a black for an artifact creature construct. It's just a 1/1. So it's indestructible. It says when Barbed Servitor enters the battlefield, suspect it. Well, it's not entering the battlefield, so you're not going to suspect Mimeoplasm. So it's not going to get that part, but the rest of this just being indestructible. And then when it deals combat damage to a player, you draw a card and you lose 1 life. So it's got some built-in card draw. And then when it is dealt damage, target opponent loses that much. So if you have a really big Mimeoplasm and it's indestructible, they're forced to block it, well, they're going to lose life regardless. So this is really good in that sense. Next up, we have Darksteel Mirror. This is just a 3-cost. Mirror 0/1, and it just says is indestructible. So this is just a 3-cost creature that's just indestructible. It makes for a great blocker, but also just can give your commander indestructible. That's the end of the protection category. Let's move on to...
Did it look something like this?
Ew, gross.
Too kind. Allow me to introduce myself. I'm the galactically feared, globally reviled, universally despised. They call me Ivan Ooze.
So in addition to making sure that Mimeoplasm stays protected, we also have to give it some evasion so that it can actually get through and do damage. So here's a few cards to meet those criteria. The first up is Azure Beastbinder. This is 1 and a blue for a Rat Rogue. It's got vigilance, it's a 1/3, and it says it can't be blocked by creatures with power 2 or greater. When this attacks, up to one target artifact, creature, or planeswalker opponent controls loses all abilities until your next turn. If it's a creature, it also has base power and toughness 2/2 until your next turn. So this can ensure if they just have one thing that's big, well, now basically you make it small, and now they have nothing that can block. As long as you exile this with Mimeoplasm, you can turn it into this at instant speed, and then you can guarantee a hit on your opponent. Next up, we have Shoreline Looter. This is 1 in a blue, again a rat rogue that's a 1/1, and it just says it can't be blocked. So if you exile this with Mimeoplasm, then basically you're unblockable for the rest of the game, and then you can switch between this and anything else and give yourself whatever you need, right? But it's got Threshold. Whenever a Shoreline Looter deals combat damage to a player, draw a card, then discard a card unless 7 or more cards are in your graveyard. So basically this is not only a way to get in, but this is also a rummage ability and a way to mill ourselves to make sure that we have a lot of cards to choose from for the next time we cast our Mimeoplasm. So next up we have Silent Hall Creeper. This is 1 in a blue for enchantment creature horror. It's a 1/1 and can't be blocked. So really great there. You are going to have to change from Hall Creeper into something else after you've done damage to a player twice because of this third ability. It says when it deals combat damage, you have to choose one of these. The first one is you put 2/1/1 counters, which would be great for Mimeoplasm. Second one is draw a card. And the third one is it becomes a copy of another target creature you control. So before that actually happens, you're gonna want to turn this into something else that you exiled, so that way basically it resets it. Because if you turn Mimeoplasm into another creature, well, now it doesn't have the ability to switch into one of the other creatures that you exiled, right? So you lose that ability, and that would be really bad because now he's vulnerable to removal. So this is a really cool card, but just remember that little fact. It's a little deal, and then you could switch back to it again, and now it's a new instance of it, and you could start over. So yeah, just a little technical there, but not too bad. Now we have Akima Stalking Shadow. This is 1 blue-black for a Whale Wolf. Love the creature type. It's a 2/2. It's got a partner. We don't really care about that. It says Akima Stalking Shadow can't be blocked. And then when it leaves the battlefield, it deals X damage to target player and you gain X life, where X is its power. So if for some reason, if you were exiled this with Mimeoplasm, though you could just play this, and if you do get removed for whatever reason, maybe you weren't able to hit on your exile to give yourself some protection, whatever it might be, you could turn yourself into this, and then you get a little bit of bonus for being removed. So just an idea there. Although I don't know that this is necessarily the best card for this deck, it is just a cool card and probably a pet card because, you know me, I love weird creature types, and this definitely fits that. So that is Akima. Next up we have Vashta Narada. This is 2 in a black, alien horror, Doctor Who card. It's a 1/1, which Mimeo wouldn't be. It's indestructible. It's got Shadow. So Shadow means it can only be blocked by creatures with Shadow. So it's a lot like Horsemanship. And it's got Morbid, which makes this actually even better, is at the beginning of each end step, if a creature died this turn, put a 1/1 counter on Vashta Narada. So basically every time a creature dies, your Mimeoplasm would get bigger. So that is the end of the Evasion. Let's now talk about
Payoffs.
Now these are all the cards that we are hoping to mill that will maybe win us the game. So these are big beaters, cards that are going to give us huge bonuses and allow us to hopefully beat our opponents. So the first one here is Demolisher Spawn. This is 5 and 2 green pips, enchantment creature horror, trample haste. It's a 7/7, and it's got Delirium. Whenever it attacks, if there are 4 or more card types among cards in your graveyard, other attack creatures get +4/+4 until end of turn. So I just love this card, and you could play this card just for the 7 and just give Mimeoplasm 4/4 and have a 7/7 attacking as well. But also you could copy this with Mimeoplasm, and maybe it's not quite as big, but just giving everything +4/+4 could be really good too. Next up we have Giggling Skitterspike. This is a 4-cost toy. It's a 1/1 that's indestructible, and when it attacks, blocks, or becomes the target of a spell, it deals damage equal to its power to each opponent. You can then pay 5, and it's Monstrosity 5, which means you put 5 counters on it. So copying this with Mimeoplasm, There's not very many cards that are going to be better than this, especially if you have a 6/6 and then you give it 5 counters. Now it's an 11/11, and they're going to be forced to try to remove it. And if they do anything but exile it, well, guess what? Like, it's going to do a bunch of damage. So this gives him awesome sticking power and is going to make him really big and tough to deal with. Next up, we have Coma World Eater. This is 3, 2 green pips and 2 blue pips, a 7 cost creature. It's a serpent, 8/12. So this card is awesome all on its own. It can't be countered. And then it says trample ward 4. So just copying this for that would be worth it. But it says when this deals combat damage to a player, create 4 3/3 blue serpent creature tokens named Coma's Coil. So you're going to get 4, that's 12 damage worth of creatures. And then you're going to also have, either an 8/12 or you're going to have your Mimeoplasm. And having ward 4 is nothing to scoff at. This basically says hexproof without actually saying it. It's going to require a board wipe, right? Next up, we have Demon of Catastrophes. This is 2 and 2 black pips for a demon, 6/6. As an additional cost to cast this spell, sacrifice a creature, Flying Trample. So this gives us Flying Trample, and you can copy this, or you could, if you had just one of these little creatures out on the board that we've talked about before, the couple of rats, you could play this for 4 and sacrifice one of those just to have a 6/6. I like this card. Works really well here. Moving on, we have the other Coma. This is Cosmo Serpent. 3, 2 green pips and 2 blue pips for Serpent. It's a 6/6. Can't be countered. Very similar. Beginning of your upkeep, create a 3/3 blue serpent creature token named Coma's Coil. So this is just going to create a Coma's Coil at the beginning of each upkeep. If you had both Comas exiled, this would be kind of nuts, because you could have at upkeep be this Coma, and then when you attack, you're the other Coma. Just really awesome. You could get a whole bunch of coils. But this says also sacrifice another serpent, choose 1, tap target permanent. Its activated abilities can't be activated this turn, or it gains indestructible. So I like having this because you can sacrifice a coil and just give your commander indestructible. And that's the end of the payoffs. Let's now talk about
Everything else.
time for everything else. These are the cards that don't have a category or are cards that I really just want to feature. So first up, we have Glarb's Calamity's Augur. This is black, green, blue for a Frog Wizard Noble. It's a 2/4 with Death Touch. You may look at the top card of your library at any time. You may play lands and cast spells with mana value 4 or greater from the top of your library. You can tap him and Surveil 2. So this is a great way to mill yourself for 2 cards every turn. It is also a way that you can play stuff off the top of your deck. This just gives you a ton of value, and it has Death Touch. You could copy this, but honestly, just playing it out for 3 mana is going to be awesome as well. Next up, we have Convert to Slime. So we have another Ooze card. This is 3, a black and a green. It says destroy up to 1 target artifact, 1 target creature, and up to 1 target enchantment. So that's 3 different things. And then if there are 4 or more card types among cards in your graveyard, which you should have, create an XX green Ooze creature token, where X is the total mana value of permanents destroyed this way. You should get a giant Ooze creature for this. All right, next up we have Head Shredder. This is a mill card. It's 2 and 2 green pips for a vehicle, 5/5. When this attacks, you mill 2 cards. And then I love this part. Whenever 1 or more land cards are put into your graveyard from your library, put them onto the battlefield tapped. So anytime you mill a land card, it just goes straight onto the battlefield. That's really what you're doing here. Granted, you could crew it for 1 and have a 5/5, but just getting those lands that you mill back onto the battlefield, great card. Next up, we have Abyssal Harvester. So this is kind of a similar card to Mimeoplasm. So if for some reason you lose Mimeoplasm, you can't cast it again. If you get this card, you can kind of do a similar thing. It's 1 and 2 black pips for a Demon Warlock. It's a 3/2. You tap it, exile target creature card from a graveyard that was put there this turn. Create a token that's a copy of it, except it's a nightmare in addition to its other types. Then exile all other nightmare tokens you control. So basically you can have 1 copy of a creature out at a time, but basically this is going to allow us to create a creature that's a copy of anything in our graveyard. Or maybe your opponents have something that's really good. You could always do that too. All right, next up we have Underrealm Lich. This is 3, a black and a green for a zombie elf shaman. It's a 4/3 if you would draw a card. Instead, look at the top 3 cards of your library, then put one into your hand and the rest into your graveyard. This is the Golgari equivalent to Ponder. Granted, it costs way more than Ponder, but it does come on a creature. And then you can pay 4 life, and this gains indestructible. Unfortunately, you have to tap it, so it's pretty similar to Regenerate in that sense. But just having that ability is really good if you can get this out on the battlefield, even though it's not a very big creature. Next up, we have Urborg Scavengers. This is 2 and a black for a spirit. And when it enters the battlefield or attacks, you exile a target creature from a graveyard, put a 1/1 counter on Urborg Scavengers. Urborg Scavengers has flying as long as the card exiled with it has flying. The same is true for First Strike, Double Strike, Death Touch, Haste, Hexproof, Indestructible, Lifelink, Menace, Reach, Trample, and Vigilance. So basically, this is, again, a replacement effect for Mimeoplasm. If you weren't able to play Mimeoplasm because of commander tax or whatever the reason is, then you can play this guy and it kind of does a similar thing. All right, now we have Soul Swallower. This is 2 and 2 green pips for a worm. It's a 3/3 with trample, and then it says at the beginning of your upkeep, if there are 4 or more card types among cards in your graveyard, put 3 1/1 counters on Soul Swallower. So this is a Delirium card, and a good one to actually exile with Mimeoplasm if you have a ton of mana, because basically at the beginning of each upkeep, you're going to get an additional 3 counters. Over time, whether you play this for itself or you play it as Mimeoplasm, you're going to basically build up a giant creature over time. Next up, we have Tanazir Quadrix, 3 green blue Elder Dragon. It's a 4/4 flying trample. When it enters the battlefield, double the number of 1/1 counters on target creature you control. Then when it attacks, you may have the base power and toughness of other creatures you control become equal to Tanazir Quadrix power and toughness until end of turn. Is it Tanazir? I think that's right. I think I said it wrong to begin with. Anyway, so if you basically copy this with Mimeoplasm, and Mimeoplasm is really big, well, now everything on your board is going to be really big. So a cool card for that reason. That's the end of that category, the end of the video. I just want to thank you guys for checking this out. Appreciate your time. If you give me a like and a subscribe, I'd really appreciate it. Catch you in the next one. Peace.